World number one, Novak Djokovic, currently finds himself in a 57 quid a night rundown quarantine hotel without access to his retinue of assistants, personal chef, or any training facilities. But don't worry, detained migrants at the same hotel have previously reported that the food comes complete with maggots, so at least he'll be getting some gluten-free protein. This video isn't actually about Novak's predicament. You can read all about that in the news. You probably already have. As I record this, the latest is that he claims to have had COVID in December, even though he was still attending events, and hence why he's exempt. Now, cards on the table, if I was covering current events, I might struggle to be entirely neutral on Djokovic. I've never been his biggest fan, long before I knew anything about his views on vaccines, for reasons that will become clear, and I'm fairly biased as a big fan of Roger and Rafa, the only GOATs that truly matter. 1 point deduction for Roger Federer for creating an outrageously expensive merch line with my initials on it. That should have been me. No, this video is about the strange overlapping Venn diagrams of sport, wellness, quackery, and conspiracy theories like QAnon. My last video was about how anti-vax has lost a clear definition in the pandemic, whereas before it was a lot more cut and dry. So I'll try to avoid using that, but let's recall that Novak said he was against vaccines before COVID vaccine was even available. It's not entirely clear if he was referring to COVID vaccines or vaccines in general, and he hasn't elaborated, but it certainly drew a wry smile to see some people holding Novak up as a hero this week for sensible thinking or pushing back against hegemony. I do think Australia's response to the pandemic has been excessive and at times a bit bizarre, but if Djokovic was attempting to make a statement, he should just do so. That's clearly not the case. He's being very secretive. So holding him up as an iconoclast is amusing when you bear in mind his quite spectacular track record. I'm not sure that this is the guy whose views you really want to be endorsing. He's promoted total lunatics like hedge fund bro turned wellness guru Chervin Jafaria, who was hawking his $50 bottles of brain juice supplements via Novak's Instagram Live to 8 million followers at the time. And during the conversation, Djokovic claimed that he had witnessed people change the composition of food and drink through positive thought alone, including cleaning dirty water or making toxic food edible. Water charities, please take note, all that cholera you've been foolishly trying to eradicate is actually just caused by poor people being a bunch of Debbie Downers. In his autobiography, Serve to Win, Novak reported a scientific study where a researcher swore at a glass of water but directed loving energy towards another. And after a few days, the bullied glass had started to go green. Now, dodgy science aside, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that abusing a non-consenting container of potable liquid is deeply problematic after the H2O2 movement. Hashtag smash the aquiarchy. A nutritionist held a slice of white bread to Novak's abdomen, and he said that he became noticeably weaker. He cut out gluten immediately, and indeed is well known for zealously proselytizing his hatred of gluten, successfully convincing multiple players on the tour to do the same. He says that each organ in the body undergoes repair in this order: lungs 3 to 5 a.m, large intestine 5 to 7 a.m, and stomach 7 to 9 a.m, which I believe is a belief from traditional Chinese medicine. I'm 99% sure that's nonsense, but I'll be honest, I haven't looked into it because I really don't care about any of those organs. He charges his body with positive ions. Quite shocking. And he told Deepak Chopra 2.0, Jay Shetty, that he places great importance in the pseudoscientific practice of Reiki. His wife, whose audience is clearly embiggened by his worldwide fame, believes that 5G is responsible for the spread of COVID. But best of all is that he says he believes in telepathy, telekinesis, and he cried for 3 days when he needed elbow surgery because he hadn't healed himself naturally and felt he'd failed himself. Andre Agassi said that this was one of the reasons that he stopped being Novak's coach. Now, talking of autobiographies, Agassi's is a very different and much more entertaining read. While Novak is against any form of drug, seemingly, Agassi seems to have been a fan of all of them. While it's amusing to hear about this wackiness, the truth is that sports stars almost invariably do a lot of oddball stuff. They're perhaps the most superstitious group of people on the planet. I'm sure you know a few rituals your favourite sports star adheres to, from wearing the same dog-eared lucky underpants in every match to elaborate multi-stage pseudo-religious ceremonies. To pretend there is a hard line between good and bad, or sensible and silly, is unrealistic. Spiritual gurus, faith healers, chiropractors, doctors offering unusual treatments, expensive supplements, cupping, Reiki, acupuncture. You can argue till you're blue in the face that these don't have evidence, but ultimately it doesn't matter, because an elite athlete will try anything they think will give them a competitive edge. And if they believe that injecting pulverized cockerel crest or rubbing cheese on their leg will help an injury or make them run faster, it may actually enable them to do that. They don't care about whether it'll work for 100 people in a clinical trial. They care if it works for them. You know this bit, the placebo effect, and the power of the mind. I won't go into it right now, but it's extremely powerful what the human body can do via the placebo. There's a fascinating body of evidence showing that all these superstitions, particularly in the context of sports athletes, is a way of them exerting control over their situation, tools for focusing their minds and achieving optimum performance. Actually, more often than not, I think the athletes don't have any belief in the paranormal or supernatural, but they utilize the routine to get in the zone. Sometimes they're more what are regarded as conventional beliefs. The greatest triple jumper in history, Jonathan Edwards, was a devout Christian during his incredible career, in fact causing him to probably lose the 91 World Championship by refusing to compete on a Sunday. And track and field was my number one sport as a youngster, so I vividly remember him visiting my school in the late 90s, and all he actually wanted to talk about was Jesus instead of any of his medals. However, when he retired, he completely lost his faith. He realized it was just something that helped him compete. I'm not an elite athlete. You're probably not an elite athlete. I mean, you could be Novak Djokovic, watching a spot of YouTube. I understand you've got a fair bit of free time on your hands at the moment. So ultimately, my pathetic whinging about evidence doesn't count for much, because I'm not winning 20 Grand Slams, fair enough. But then we also need to accept the corollary that people who have dedicated their entire lives to being phenomenally good at hitting a ball don't necessarily have knowledge in areas outside of knowing how to be really good at hitting a ball, and we probably shouldn't listen to them. Now, I don't want to get into a whole thing about the awfulness of celebrity culture and why we pay attention to what any celebrity says about all number of things is beyond me. But there is something particularly interesting about sports people, because they embody so many things that we mortals want to be. Fit, successful, skillful, just pictures of optimum health. So Djokovic having weird ideas hardly makes him unique, and endorsing a plant-based diet and positive thinking isn't dangerous. But when he organised his disastrous Adria tournament in June 2020, the height of the pandemic, leading to multiple COVID infections amongst people that had visited thereafter, it became clear that a rejection of common sense has wider implications than just convincing fans to pay their mineral water a compliment. Djokovic initially refused to accept any mistake, but eventually did apologise. Djokovic's word cloud of pseudoscientific beliefs would include things like natural, organic, pure, spiritual, and so on. And all of these very much fit into the space that's been branded as wellness these days, but in days gone by was also referred to as a kind of new age philosophy. Wellness is now over a $1 trillion business. I touched on a lot of the reasons why wellness and companies like Goop are so successful and popular in a video a couple of years ago now, pre-pandemic. Do check that out if you haven't had a look. I think it stands up reasonably well. But since COVID forced its way onto us like a wellness guru molesting a glass of water, wellness has found itself in bed, an organic hemp CBD infused bed, with COVID conspiracies and anti-science misinformation. Now, much has been written about the strange entry point into troubling beliefs like QAnon via the unlikely source of yoga influencer Instagram accounts and wellness pages. Hardly the angry Capitol riot type people that most people think of when you mention Q. I first learnt of this via the podcast Conspirituality last year, 2020 actually, which charts the fascinating intersection between wellness and conspiracy theories. There have been quite a few articles about it too, and I went to check out some of the gateway accounts that post kind of unproven or debunked conspiracies, and they're not Facebook Karens screaming to 200 followers. They're really massive, very slick, very professional, gorgeous looking accounts with almost invariably beautiful women barefoot on a sun-kissed beach in a straw hat or achieving inner peace on their yoga mat. In fact, it's quite striking how similar a lot of the accounts look. Interestingly, one association with some of these accounts, as you might expect from QAnon supporters, is an overlap with racism. Now, I'm not well versed enough in this whole area, nor particularly in Balkan politics, but Djokovic is sometimes accused of nationalistic sentiments as well. I asked a Serbian friend, and she said he's known for his closeness to the political establishment, the church, and has a in-your-face religiosity, and has said some things considered nationalistic. So perhaps that's another hallmark of this particular way of thinking as well, but that's an aside. Let's concentrate on health and science. Because these same accounts have also been key promoters of anti-scientific falsehoods regarding COVID. People talk about slippery slopes into extreme beliefs, and the path here is quite easy to see. Someone to whom wellness appeals often tends to be skeptical of conventional medicine. I talked about that in the Goop video. The evils of big pharma will always get some likes. The failings of the healthcare system, particularly in the US. Now, these are things I talk about in videos as well, so I'm always mindful of my comments being taken out of context, but I try to be as evidence-based as possible, and it's important to recognize the problems that are driving people to these beliefs, but ultimately it's a Bayesian phenomenon. My prior belief is that there is not a global conspiracy to inject microchips into people. So when I talk about vaccines, and I mention positives and negatives, I can, I hope as dispassionately as possible, try to assess their impact. However, if your prior is that you're sort of programmed with a belief that doctors are motivated only by profit, that public health initiatives are attempts at mass mind control, and government messaging is always propaganda, then you will see any shortcoming with the vaccines as evidence that nefarious powers are forcing something harmful on you rather than medical science simply being imperfect. Or even before the vaccines came out, you may have forgotten, a lot of these accounts were popularizing documentaries about COVID being a hoax or that it was planned and bioweapons and all these kinds of things. The thing that always gets me is how people complain about pharmaceutical companies wanting to make money, but then they're absolutely fine with wellness influencers' completely shameless grift. Some move seamlessly from comparing COVID vaccines to the Holocaust before going straight on to hawking their diet book or their supplements. Here's one epic post to 85,000 followers checking off the Holocaust, McCarthyism, slavery, Mao's Cultural Revolution, and the Spanish Inquisition as comparators to the COVID vaccine. So in this context, Novak Djokovic is simply representative of the extremely high levels of vaccine skepticism within wellness circles, and with wellness's origins being the same as its predecessor, the New Age movement, they both came out of a reaction to the ills of the modern world. The insane world that we've found ourselves in over the last 2 years has funneled millions of new devotees into the apparently wholesome and virtuous world of wellness, not least because people have had more time to engage with yoga or surf the web, but because lockdown and the uncertainty it's brought has made some people desperate to wrest some semblance of control back over their lives. I mean, hell, even right here on YouTube, we've seen the rise of pandemic lifestyle vloggers. Instead of the traditional YouTuber trope of luxury and excess, it's been clean eating, uncluttered minimalism, with an emphasis on natural healing, natural immunity, natural solutions, and that the virus, and indeed your risk profile to it, are products of this unnatural world that's lost its way. And it's led ostensibly sensible people, that's quite hard to say, to believe strange things. The wellness community is home to people claiming to cure cancer with juice, to fight autoimmune disease with apple cider vinegar, to reverse heart disease with essential oils. Most normal people would laugh at all of those. So why are you trusting the same people with their views on the pandemic? That same mentality causes people to say things like the vaccine is toxic, or that health is a simple individual choice rather than a complex intermingling of dozens of variables like genetics, economics, circumstances, luck, along with lifestyle choices. If I lead a pure life of daily meditation, hot yoga, juice cleanses, and journaling in my 6-bedroom house, why should I have to take responsibility for poor fat people's health? I'm sorry that people are disabled, but that's really not something I want to think about when I'm practicing my daily gratitude. Why should I cover my face? Why should I get vaccinated? There are criticisms to be made about any medical intervention, but they have to be based on evidence, not a gut feeling. You can either be suspicious of bad science or suspicious of science. There's a world of difference. The latter, where Novak Djokovic seems to fall, at least when it comes to health, I'm pretty sure he's absolutely fine with the science behind his tennis racket, they base their decision on the woo that runs through wellness. The former, the group I like to think I belong to, suspicious of bad science, but not science in general, attempts to pick the quality of evidence apart. And it's really hard to be objective about yourself and try to figure out your own biases about how you interpret data, but it's better than believing in hocus pocus. There's undoubtedly loads to say about this. I feel like I'm only just scratching the surface. I wrote this on Saturday afternoon, I'm filming it on Saturday night, but I feel like Charlie connecting the dots in It's Always Sunny, but instead of Pepe Sylvia, it's a web of wellness and self-help gurus, individualism, a mistrust in science and expertise, the systematic abuse of hydrogen dioxide, and of course, conspiracy theories. Hang on, did I just compare myself to a conspiracy theorist? Wow, this goes deeper than I thought. This is my t-shirt from when I worked at IBM at Wimbledon. As a teenager, I pestered them for months to second me to the championships. And I thought I'd be one of those little kind of hamsters in a tiny box pressing forehand, backhand, ace that goes on the screen. But apparently those jobs, they told me, only go to junior tennis players from the All England Lawn Tennis Club and sort of local clubs. And I was definitely nowhere near that standard. And I got to know a bunch of those junior players, and their job actually turned out to be awful. They were stuck in a little shed with no air conditioning, working long shifts. One guy, his job, I'm sure this is all going to be automated these days, but was just to time how long the IBM logo appeared on BBC TV. Start a stopwatch, stop a stopwatch, and just, that was his job the whole day. So I had a lucky escape there, but I got another job. I can't really tell you what it was because I quickly sacked it off and just dossed about and watched tennis for 2 weeks. It was a fantastic time. I met loads of the players, but the person I talked to most, because he'd come to ask me almost on a daily basis for a printout of all the stats that IBM would produce for the 2 sisters that he coached, was Richard Williams. And I haven't seen Will Smith's latest movie where he plays him, but I have a lot of fond memories of him. He was always really friendly to me. And the other highlight was I took my chance to do a John McEnroe impersonation to John McEnroe himself on the roof of the media center. The clip of him having a meltdown was the most popular on the IBM computers. So any visitor using them would play this clip, and I must have heard it dozens of times every day. So I'd perfected my impression. I think he was a bit freaked out. He laughed nervously and moved away without really saying anything. Oh, and Sue Barker hit me in the face with a door. She was very rude. So I guess the point of this video is don't go to tennis players for health advice, and don't come to me for tennis advice unless it is an inside-out slap cross-court forehand where I am pretty bad.